Good morning. Although the symposium doesn't begin until 1, I already know that this morning is really going to be the highlight of the day. On behalf of our council, members and staff of the American Geographical Society, I welcome you, our third class of Geography Teacher Fellows. Some of you for the first time, and others part of our class from 2 years ago. The history of AGS is long and storied. Since 1851, AGS has been at the forefront of leading the cause for geography and most recently geospatial science. We don't have time to review our history this morning. We have a lot of other important work to do. But suffice to say that you are now not only a part of our illustrious history, you are an important part and an influence on what it will be in the future. Although geography as a field of study has been around for a long time, the explosion of geospatial science and tools in just the last few years has propelled geography to the forefront of technological advancement, ease in conducting our day-to-day activities, furtherment of scientific discovery, and the need for a new generation of young professionals to fill the many career opportunities for those who are geographically and geospatial savvy. And that is where you come in. For the most part, you are the first formal connection students have with geography and geospatial science. You are not only experts in this area, but you are the ones who make a first impression on students about this field of study that all of us hold dear. If AGS is to continue its 167-year-old mission to lead the cause for geography and now geospatial science, we need you to be an integral part of our leadership. We need the people on the front lines. We need the people who understand the ubiquitous nature of geography, and we need the people who will have the greatest impact on the generations who are going to take our places in the not very distant future. In short, we need you. You have graciously accepted our invitation to join us for the next couple of days, and we hope you will benefit from this experience as much as we expect to benefit from you being here. We pride ourselves on providing experiences for professionals who do not normally have the opportunity to get together. This meeting is going to bring together business leaders, not-for-profit professionals, some of the brightest and most renowned academics, and senior government officials in one room to discuss and plan how the production and consumption of energy will impact our lives in the very near future. You are part of this group now, and we need to hear from you today, tomorrow, and then on a continual basis to make sure that the future we are planning makes sense. This year, we're honored to welcome colleagues from the People's Republic of China. Over the last couple of years, Columbia University and AGS have been cooperating with East China Normal University, ironically nicknamed the Columbia of China. Our Chinese colleagues are extremely interested in geographic education and geospatial science. In fact, as many of you know, geography is extremely valued in Asia and for that matter in most parts of the world. One of our geography teacher fellows from our first class, Lily Monk, has traveled with us to China to participate in our work there. We are planning to expand our work with our Chinese colleagues, and as part of that expansion, several of them will be joining us today for the symposium and for the workshop on Saturday. This is an incredible opportunity for all of you to compare notes with them. As you probably already know, the geography curriculum in China has many aspects in common with AP Human Geography, the course you all teach. During the next couple of days, several of them have prepared poster presentations which highlight their work on geographic education. Please take time to look at their work, interact with them, and help us to learn from the experiences of fellow educators who truly value geography and geospatial science. In your packets, we've provided you with 20 business cards. We're hoping that the conversations you have in the next couple of days spark some ideas that you will have you thinking about how you can continue the discussions with the business, government, and academic symposium attendees. As you meet with your new colleagues, share your business cards with them and look for opportunities to bring back what you find out to your classrooms. You will have a chance to participate in discussions with CEOs of some of the most innovative geospatial companies in the country, with senior officials from government and various not-for-profit organizations, and some of the brightest minds who lead research and explorations around the world. I know they are eager to talk to you. They are the ones who insisted that we make inviting you to our symposium the highest of priorities. And on Saturday, we'll reconvene in Low Library and spend the day reviewing the Mapathon and the symposium and having in-depth discussions about how we at AGS can support you in your classrooms and beyond. So again, welcome. We are eager to hear from you, and we are excited that you have accepted a place at the table to lead the cause for geography and geospatial science. None of the work that we do would be possible without the cooperation and support of our corporate partners. When we conceived the idea of AGS Geography Teacher Fellows, one of our partners immediately spoke up and said, "We want to be sure that this project happens, we're in, whatever it takes." Boundless, with the support of Andy Deering and David Gwynn, have allowed us to reach out to you and make the Geography Teacher Fellows program happen. Boundless is one of those companies I mentioned earlier. Anyone in the world of geospatial science and tools knows that Boundless is one of the undisputed leaders in the field, and how appropriate that this company be the one to sponsor Geography Teacher Fellows. It's a real pleasure to introduce to you Mr. David Gwynn, the Director of Customer Success at Boundless. David?
Thank you, John. Happy to be here. Geographers are like foodies. When we walk into a restaurant, or when a foodie walks into a restaurant, they don't say, "Oh, good smell." What they say is, "Oh, that smells like chicken with a little bit of tarragon, oh, and maybe a little bit of oregano." And once that bowl gets in front of you, the foodie says, "Oh, as I have my first taste of this broth, there's also something else in there. What is that? Oh, is a little bit of cinnamon, a little bit of nutmeg?" It's that curiosity, it's that insatiable pursuit of knowledge and deep understanding of what's in that food that really makes it sort of a fun experience for your foodies. And as geographers, as we study different areas around the world, that's one of the drivers. That's what makes it fun for us. We're going into and studying a society, and it's not just one aspect of that society. It's the political, it's the economic, it's the demographic, it's the technical and engineering. It's not just one of those, it's all of those. So geography is that original synthesis discipline, which makes things really fun. The other thing is, it's also very complex. That's frankly what attracted me to it, but then that complexity is what allows you to solve real problems in a real world, because the world's complex, easy enough. The other thing about geographers is we want to take it a step further. So thinking about the foodie analogy, we can't change that broth. That broth is baked. That's what we have to deal with. So we need to understand that before we can affect positive change in that instance. So if we want to marinate some beef in that broth, if we want to add some new ingredients, some additional salt, or our own twist with shallots, we can do that. But that's that next step. Geographers have to have that base knowledge before they can go to that next step and start to affect change in the world, positive change in the world. So that's thinking about geographers. Thinking about you all here. You're the vanguard for making that happen, for the next generation, for inspiring them to think and deal with these complex, interrelated issues and make sense of it. And that's a very exciting thing, because every day in this industry we wake up and there's a new problem set that we have to focus on. So, I would encourage you to definitely introduce and convey that level of newness, everyday newness, to your students. Boundless is, as a sponsor of this teacher Mapathon, is happy to be involved in this. We were able to bring 50 additional AP teachers from around the country here to this event. We are very much committed to education, to furthering education in the geographic realm. My colleague, Dr. Christina Hoopy, is here as well, and she leads a whole team of personnel dedicated to geographic education and getting that word out. We have also provided free software to educators to help them to evolve in their own capabilities for geospatial analysis, for understanding that complexity in the real world. A little bit about Boundless. What do we do? My sister last night said, "What do you do?" "I don't know what you do." "What does your company do?" And what I said to her was, we create capability to allow knowledge creation from massive data sets across space and time. So that's what we do. We make a series of different tools in this particular time in history where big data is the norm. The tools we're making allow you to cull through those large volumes of data, because as geographers, when you say, "What type of data would you like?" the answer is usually yes. So we want more data rather than less, and we're in a big data world, so you need tools to be able to cull through that data. But why? So you can get useful information out of it. So that's what Boundless does. And then finally, I'm happy to be here. This is the first AGS I've been at, but I've been in the industry for a long time. But I realized what got me into geography was energy. So it was back in 1973, in the oil embargo, sitting in my parents' VW wagon and thinking, my God, the world has come to an end. Our world can shut down because of something halfway around the world. And that sort of got me on a path that I'd never strayed from. That is, why? Where are the linkages? And that's kept it fun every day. So with that, Boundless again is happy to be sponsoring you, and look forward to seeing all the good work you're doing, and happy to talk with you throughout the day. Thanks.
Thank you, David. We're very grateful to you and everyone at Boundless for making this happen. Last year, MapBox, one of the foremost providers of customized maps for some of the world's largest international companies and organizations, began work with us on a number of projects. When they expressed interest in supporting the symposium, they instantly asked about the Mapathon for the AGS Teacher Fellows that they had heard of. After just one quick phone call, they were on board with us, and again this year, we're very proud to welcome them as the sponsor of today's Mapathon, which is being especially planned for you. And here to represent MapBox is Mr. Brian Housel, the project lead for OpenStreetMap ID Editor. Brian?
Thank you, Dr. Konarski. I'm very excited to be here, both representing MapBox and also the OpenStreetMap project. This is a really exciting time for OpenStreetMap. This morning, I was even reading something on the GeoAwesomeness blog. This is something written by Eduardo Nian, where he talks about OpenStreetMap as not just the largest, freest, editable map of the world, but it's also becoming something of a standard. And when we say standard, standards are often things we talk about, like the internet is built on standards. USB is a standard, shipping containers are standard size and everything. And what standards do is they foster collaboration. They foster innovation. And OpenStreetMap right now is doing these things as companies like MapBox, but also I would say humanitarian organizations like the Red Cross, like Médecins Sans Frontières, and logistics companies like Amazon, hardware companies like Apple, Microsoft, transportation companies like Lyft and Uber, and even social media giants like Facebook and Snapchat are all using OpenStreetMap today. And this is exciting. This is something that is very relevant to everybody. And incidentally, if you're trying to get your students interested in mapping, telling them that the map that they have to edit for their homework happens to be the same map in Pokemon Go or the same map in Snapchat, they actually do respond to that. Yeah, so it can be a bit of a double-edged sword, however, because OpenStreetMap, like Wikipedia, is a big collaborative project, and we get our share of vandalism. This happened back in August, where somebody renamed New York City an OpenStreetMap to an offensive name, and it got reverted pretty quickly. But within that window of when it was vandalized, MapBox actually pulled it in, and it slipped through our pipeline, and we showed an offensive name to a lot of people. So this is the takeaway from this is that we are all still figuring this stuff out, what it means to make a map with 5 million other people. We're kind of in uncharted territory when you think about it. And the answers to what it means to have data that you can trust, data that's authoritative, data that's, that people can use, the answers to this cannot be answered alone by just techies like me. We need we need humanities, we need law, we need ethics, we need human geography. And that is why I want to thank all of you for being here, for being teachers, for teaching human geography, and for just getting the next generation of geographers excited, because we have a lot of maps to make and a lot of questions to answer about what it means to make these maps. So just in conclusion, I want to just thank everybody, and I hope that you enjoy the activities that the TeachOSM folks have planned for you today. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our chairman, Dr. Christopher Tucker, and our president, Dr. Marie Price, who would like to formally welcome you to AGS.
Good morning, everyone. It's so nice to have you here. I know there's how many people, is this your second Mapathon? Okay, great. So we have a few returning veterans and new people. I'm Marie Price. You'll be seeing me for the next couple of days and hopefully at other events. We are so happy to have you. The idea of bringing a community of educators who care passionately about geography to this conference is so important. I've been able to go to the AP Human Geography grading events and see the intensity in which you and your colleagues embrace human geography. The Facebook page is one of the best pages I've ever seen in terms of sharing information. I wish other teachers would take educating and sharing best practices as seriously and effectively as you all do. Hopefully, some things I'd like you to learn about the AGS when you're here, and if you have questions, you can come up and talk to me, or any of the other counselors, or John Konarski, Chris Tucker, is that we do want to provide materials that might be useful to you. And one thing, if you haven't seen our Focus on Geography link, if you just type in Focus on Geography, there are a bunch of quizzes and articles. You can upload them, share them with your class, discussions. It's changing all the time. In fact, there is an energy quiz on Focus on Geography, and since you'll return to your students brimming over with ideas about energy, you can see how well you do on your quiz and how well the students will do, and it gives you your score at the end, and it's fun. Other than that, we do, if you follow us on Facebook and Twitter, we always are trying to provide new materials and insights. We welcome your feedback and look forward to working with you in the years ahead. Thank you and welcome.
Thanks, Marie. I'll just speak very briefly. I look forward to meeting every single one of you. You may not think that you came here and you're going to be the highlight of the conference, but for many of the people, particularly in industry and government, they really look forward to meeting our teacher fellows. A lot of us sit in chambers of government or in the corporate boardroom and we wonder, how can we reach the next generation? How can we engage the next generation in geographic literacy or a passion for geographic data? And we actually don't really have direct contact. And what we've been attempting to do for the past 3 years is start to build those bridges, build a bridge that we can all use, hopefully not to overwhelm you as teachers since you have a full-time job, or to overwhelm your students who not only have your class but other classes, but to build a bridge so that government, industry, academia, teachers, social sector can all interact to make the world a better place through geography. So you're going to run into a bunch of people who are going to ask you, like, well, how do you do it in your classroom? And what do your kids think about this stuff? And, what if I had this kind of thing, how could I make it available to the students in your classroom? And those are like legitimate kind of curiosity conversations that you're going to find yourself in. And, just jump in with both feet, please. So anyways, enjoy the Mapathon. I'll be here all week. So I'd love to just meet you at every possible break and enjoy the symposium. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris and Marie. So I just heard that our Chinese colleagues have just arrived, and I just want to give them a very brief welcome. Our colleagues from the People's Republic of China, they're going to be with you for the next couple of days, and they'll be attending the workshop, the symposium, as well as all of this. So maybe if our new colleagues could stand, we could recognize you. Great. Okay, now it's time to get to work. We are very proud to welcome today the group that is going to lead us with the Mapathon. Our coordinators of this Mapathon are among the most respected and well-known mapping experts in the country. They have led events like the one we're going to have today across the United States, and the results of their work not only fill the pages on professional journals, but they have been cited in virtually every type of media platform. They are, in fact, leading a movement that has its roots in geography and geospatial science and has real, immediate, and critical impact on society. And most importantly, it's another shining example of something that is hallmark of being an American, that of service to others. Their work, and now your work, will be felt, recognized, and used today by the time you finish later this morning. And with that, I asked our co-founders of TeachOSM, Dr. Nuala Cohen, Mr. Richard Hinton, and Mr. Stephen Johnson, take it from here.
Good morning, everybody. Are you ready to get working? Yes? So we'll give you some brief introductions, and then we'll jump straight in. As John so kindly introduced us already, but just a little bit more, my name is Dr. Nuala Cohen. I'm with the George Washington University Department of Geography as a research faculty, and I also work with a group at the World Bank called the Open Data for Resilience Initiative, and we work with governments in developing countries around open data for disasters, so kind of mixing those two things together. And I want to give the floor to Stephen, and he can introduce himself.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to be here and really happy to see you here. I see a few familiar faces as some of the returnees here, and I'm delighted that you all came back. I'm Stephen Johnson. I am a co-founder of TeachOSM. I also am an adjunct professor of geography at the George Washington University.
Good morning, everybody. Happy to be here again and see all you guys. My name is Richard Hinton. I am as well at the George Washington University. I manage the Spatial Analysis Lab, which is where we teach all of our geospatial GIS classes. Co-founder with these fine people with TeachOSM. And I also get the opportunity to teach. I teach an introduction to cartography and GIS. And then a few years ago, Nuala and I created an open source GIS class that we teach every spring as well. So we're looking forward to working with you and getting to know you over the next couple of days.
Okay, so if I could just get the slide deck up and we can get rolling. So while they're doing that, can I ask how many of you have mapped in OpenStreetMap before? Okay, so we have a nice little mix, and that's good because my favorite way to do this, to instruct in OSM, is actually to buddy up and have people help each other, because as you learn, those of you that are new, it can be quite a subjective enterprise, so having other people's opinion on what you're seeing or how you should tag or attribute it is really, really important. So, yes, please. Yeah.
You're good.
Okay, here we are. Okay, so very, very quickly, overview of what we're going to do today. To begin with, we're going to have you be the student. We're going to switch it around. I know everybody here is a teacher, but we're just going to pretend that we're the teachers for this morning and you're the student. So we're going to learn a little bit about OpenStreetMap and also the OpenStreetMap community. What it takes to be a good mapper, how to most effectively contribute to the platform in a good way so that you can communicate that to your students going forward. Some of the best practices around mapping and being part of the OpenStreetMap community, and we'll begin by mapping in our backyard, somewhere that's familiar to us, but now looking at it from a different perspective. Then we'll move on to working on group projects. It's one thing to do this solo, it's another to coordinate a big group of people to potentially map in the same place simultaneously, and what the rules of the game are for that, and also how you organize it. And we have 2 tasks that we're going to collaborate on today, and Richard will tell you more about those in a moment. Then you're going to revert back to being the teacher again at a little after 11, and we're going to show you again how to lead and coordinate and design these projects, and that's something that will carry through to Saturday as well. And we'll talk about that assignment, and I think we have a group photo, and then we will have lunch. So just to talk a little bit about open mapping, what it's about and what this new thing is. I think we've really seen a revolution in terms of geography for sure, when geography and technology have come together. And open mapping has really been at the forefront of that. And much of it was born out of disaster response, and I think my colleagues can testify to that. The need to have locational awareness for what we call locational awareness for disaster response. So post-disaster for logistics and for planning, that whole situational awareness. And open platforms like OpenStreetMap allowed anybody to help in an effort from their armchair to contribute data to places that were data poor, or that we didn't have easily accessible data for. So it brings the experience to the ordinary mapper. Definitely from an academic perspective. When I started geography in college many years ago, I think my parents were like, I guess, what are you going to do with that? They didn't know. They were like, okay, you're going to be a teacher, yeah? And I was like, and I ended up being a teacher, yes. But they didn't see that there were other careers beyond continuing to educate others in that particular discipline. But we've seen a complete revolution in the types of careers that students can be a part of, and you'll see that from MapBox and Boundless and all the different federal agencies and companies that will be part of this conference, that geographers are everywhere, and so much of it is part of technology. The community aspect of open data, it's no longer the realm of the academics, it's no longer in school. Much of the work that I do at the World Bank, we actually engage with community stakeholders. They're part of the mapping process. They help us decide how the data will be used to affect change and affect policy in their communities. And that's really, really important, that you don't have this silo. Also the idea of interaction, and that goes along with the community experience, that it's very active geography. We can sit here together and we can create data, but then we can go out into the field and change it and add to it. Obviously, there is a historical side to it in the way that we record history. And from a service perspective, the fact that you can feel part of something and you can contribute. And that's what led a lot of our students to form something called Youth Mappers that we'll talk about in a moment. The answer to this is kind of everybody, and I think Chris alluded to this kind of in his speech, who is here and who is part of this. Everybody that is here is probably in some way, shape, or form supporting or using OpenStreetMap. And it's become quite a popular tool, especially in places where more kind of proprietary data sources and companies just don't have a reason to be yet. And those communities will map themselves. And that's us, of course. So before we jump into the actual mapping itself, I want to talk a little bit about some of the organizations in our community that make use of it. And this is really from the perspective of the 3 of us here, because we work very closely with development and disaster response initiatives. So that's kind of the lens through which we see the use of a lot of this data. So there's a group called Humanitarian OpenStreetMap. Has anybody heard of those guys before? Some of you? I think maybe some of the people who have been here in previous years may have heard of them. So Humanitarian OpenStreetMap are a nonprofit group that were formed after the earthquake in Haiti. There was not a lot of geospatial data for Haiti when groups came in to respond after the disaster. So just in terms of getting from A to B, just logistics of trying to find places to help, it made, you know, foreign boots on the ground had a lot of struggles with getting things mobilized and getting things working. And it started actually in Tufts University and the whole hub of universities up around that area, and I think Clark as well was part of it. A group of students started to use satellite imagery to trace using the OpenStreetMap platform, and it was a rather new initiative around about then. And they kind of brought in all the geo-geeks from the community to do the same. And I don't have it here, but I can show it to you. I think it would be quite a motivational slide to show your students. There's this wonderful animation of how quickly Port-au-Prince and the surrounding area was mapped within a week. It was an insane number of edits. I think a colleague of ours equated it to 4 years of one individual's traditional work of mapping was completed in 1 week. So that was quite impressive. So this group said, okay, this is a thing, this idea of responding to disasters with mapping. So they formed Humanitarian OpenStreetMap. And this group went on to create something wonderful called the Tasking Manager, which we will use a little later, this wonderful tool that will allow multiple people to collaborate mapping in the same area simultaneously without any overlap or duplication of efforts. And rather than having this knee-jerk reaction to disasters, which we probably will always have to a certain extent, they've really motivated themselves to move into communities where they know there's a risk. So we can get those places mapped beforehand and have a community that is part of that and kind of build this whole preparation and awareness thing into the mapping side of things. Maps don't solve everything, they help, but there's all these wonderful tangential activities that you can do along with the mapping. So they're a really wonderful group that we work with regularly. Another interesting organization to come out of this is something called Youth Mappers. Youth Mappers was founded in 2013, and George Washington University was one of 3 founding partners for that, along with Texas Tech University in West Virginia. And from a grant from USAID, they're funding an international network of student organizations. So these are university students, so adult youth. And right now we have, last count, 141 chapters across 41 countries. And the number of students involved, they're trying to estimate it's something around 5,000. It's hard to know because we don't require like every single member to register. But these groups, they meet regularly, maybe weekly, bi-weekly, and they work on tasks many times in conjunction with Humanitarian OpenStreetMap, because that's that real response thing that brings them to the table. And they contribute to OpenStreetMap, to put unmapped places on the map. We are trying to encourage, us being a co-founder of that, this effort to become more boots on the ground, not just sitting at your computer and mapping places you've never been to, but making sure you get your own community mapped well, and then getting out there and adding the rich information about names of buildings, names of streets, functions of buildings, conditions of buildings, like all that really detailed info that only a local can add. So Youth Mappers has been quite a success, and we're very, very proud of it. Another really interesting group or consortium that is part of this network is the Missing Maps group. And the Missing Maps was started by the American Red Cross, the British Red Cross, and Médecins Sans Frontières. They were the founding members, and now it has grown to have many, many organizations as part of it, like Youth Mappers is now part of it. This is all quite a big family. All these people know each other, and they work together, and they reach out to each other, which is another part of what makes this a great community. And along the same theme as much of the other work we do, this is specifically at targeting unmapped places in the world, places that are vulnerable to different sorts of disasters, be they human conflict or be those related to environmental issues. And they've really kind of championed making that whole mapping methodology accessible. They've created wonderful tools and interfaces to make this as easy as possible. And especially when you're trying to teach this, some people might say, okay, you know, I'll log on to this mapping platform and make a map. Like, that's not super cool or super interesting. You know, some people might not find that super engaging. And often we find that backstory, the why I'm doing this, it's the really compelling reason why people want to sit there and draw little boxes for hours and hours on hand. And I think missing maps have illustrated many great examples of why you would want to do this. So visiting their site, they have a lot of great information about how to host events, to motivate your mappers and things like that. So they are also a wonderful group of people. So that's kind of a little bit of background, the context of what brought us to this, really. It was kind of the backstory that motivated us to want to be part of it rather than necessarily the technology itself. So we're going to get you mapping, okay? So we're going to begin with OSM account creation. So I'm going to get everybody to open a browser on their computer. Now what we've found is this likes to work a little bit better, yeah? Mm-hmm. Of course. So,
I'm sorry. Later on today, you're going to hear our keynote speaker, Mr. Robert Cardillo, who is the director of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. And when he learned that he had the opportunity to come and meet just with the teachers, he kind of jumped at it, and we are really, really pleased that he has made a special appearance today to welcome all of you to this. So, Robert?
Boy, pardon the interruption. I really just want to say three things to this group. One is congratulations. You should feel really good about what you've accomplished and the recognition that you're properly receiving here, and what a great program. Two is thank you. I can't execute my mission without you. And so there just can't be enough goodness, quite frankly, from what you're creating and the talent and ultimately the education and then the expertise that we need to do our job. And three is just a very short commercial that I also hope you'll be able to take with you. So I am proud to be the director of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. I'm 35 years in this career field, this profession, and have now just started my 5th year as director. Best thing about my job is I get to go to work each day with thousands of geographers. And because of the size of our agency, we're almost 10,000 federal employees, I need hundreds each year to refill the talent pool and to continue our mission execution. The agency's motto is to know the earth and show the way and understand the world. And again, we need your help to create that talent. Here's the commercial. It's short. We're founded nga.mil. Under careers, you'll see student programs. Under student programs, you'll see internship opportunities. This is after your first year of higher education. It's a competitive process, but we bring in about 300 each summer. Upon graduation, 90% of the interns get offers of employment, and 90% of those offers are accepted. So what a wonderful pipeline for us to continue the mission that we execute for the nation. And on that mission side, yep, we're a national security organization. We support the Department of Defense. We do some of those traditional missions, but you should also know that we supported and support today the fight against Ebola and disease spread, the reality of the conditions in the Arctic and the Antarctic. That's also posted on nga.mil. We're in California today supporting lead domestic agencies in fighting the fires. So it's a wonderful place potentially for the students that you're helping to educate to end up. And I should also say, too, that because of sponsors such as Columbia and partners such as Boundless and Esri, et cetera, if they end up there, they're on the team. So we have multiple ways to create those outcomes. I'll finish where I started. Thank you very much for what you do, and congratulations on the achievement that you've made. Again, can't be better for us, quite frankly, to continue that pool of talent that we need to do our mission. But again, congratulations. Thanks.
So I can actually attest to that pipeline. Many of our former students have had those internships, and most of them have gone on to pretty long careers at NGA. So that is definitely true. So back to the browser. What we find with this one is it works particularly good with Chrome. It works with most everything, but it tends to not like Microsoft Explorer too well, but most of the other ones should work for you. So if you want to bring up openstreetmap.org, and in the top right-hand corner, there's an option to sign up. So you can move to the sign up page. Now, what I advise people to do here, if you haven't an account already, the display name part, be creative, cute, whatever you want to be, but I wouldn't put my real name in there or my email. I've had some of my students put their whole email in there as their username, just again for like personal privacy and protection. If you were to go in and, let's say, change a state boundary or something like that, you will incur the ire of many armchair mappers all over the world, and you might not want that coming directly to your personal email account. So I don't know what you want to be, mapping rocks 49 or something like that, but yeah, just don't use your email. So I'll give you a moment to do that, and it will send a confirmation before you can sign in. But as soon as you have that and you sign in, we'll move to the live demo part.
Richard and I are kind of roaming the floor, and so if you need technical assistance at any time, please let us know, yes.
Please don't be afraid to wave. That's what we're here for. There's no such thing as a dumb question as far as this is concerned. So while you're waiting for that to start, I'm going to explain a little bit about this tool, okay? There's a couple of different tools that you can use to contribute to OpenStreetMap or to create new data. But our preferred tool for new mappers, and many people decide to stick with it, is something called the ID editor. And as you heard from Brian already, MapBox was the designer behind this tool. And what I love about it is you don't need to be a technical person or a geographer or anything like that in order to learn how to use it and use it effectively. It is very, very logical and user-friendly, and that's why, you know, back before OSM changed the rules, we had a whole classroom of Girl Scouts that we had contributing, and they picked it up just like that. So it's kind of an all ages range in terms of tools. How are we on account creation? Are we getting close? Anybody still lagging behind? One or two people? Now, the thing to remember is I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly, and then we'll all move to the floor to help you. So if you do get a little behind what I'm showing you, absolutely no worries. We have open mapping time and plenty time to answer questions. Okay, so the process we're going to do is get your account in order, log into OSM, and what I want you to do is zoom to an area that is familiar to you. I always believe that you should start mapping somewhere that you know, because even if you're not used to seeing it from that bird's eye view, you can become accustomed to it, and you can add that more detailed information, the idea of this street is this name, this store is this name, it provides this service. So it's always the best way, rather than dumping someone in the middle of a completely different country where they have maybe no sense of what the infrastructure is composed of, things like that. So we start with baby steps. So we zoom into an area that's familiar to us. Now within OSM, in order to be allowed edit, you have to zoom in close enough. We don't want to add information at such a high level that we're doing it like crudely. You know, think Elmo with a crayon. You know, we want, you know, Van Gogh style mapping here. So we need to get really in close there so we can interpret that imagery in the best way possible. And what you'll notice is there's a series of little buttons at the top of the OSM browser, Edit, History, and Export. And the Edit button won't turn green unless you're zoomed in close enough. And I still think you have to go in a couple of zooms more to really be able to interpret efficiently. So when you zoom into that area that's familiar to you, and the Edit button goes green, zoom in a little bit more, then click on that Edit button. And what you'll find is it will give you a little list of possible tools that you can use to edit, and we're going to go with ID because I feel that's the best one to start. Okay? So when you click on edit, it won't straight away just edit. It will ask you to pick your browser, and you will go with ID. And what will happen is the map will change. You will no longer see what looks almost like a picture, what we call a vector map. You will see imagery, and all the line work and the buildings and things like that will look almost like, I don't know, an engineering drawing, like AutoCAD or something. So you will see the roads and the buildings superimposed on top of the imagery. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to switch over and actually show you what this looks like from my perspective. So if you're not actively doing this on your machine yet, that is totally fine. You'll have plenty of time just to show you what it looks like for me. So this is somewhere that I know. Anyone guess where that might be? Wait, it doesn't matter if you butcher the name, but what country do you think this might be? Yay. So this is where I grew up, and I think I'm the only one that's actually mapping here. All the buildings that you see are a consequence of 20 or so Mapathons where I've done this little demo. I had like 2 houses at a time. But, so this is my area. I can see buildings, so I'm confident that I might be able to contribute at this level. So I will go to Edit. I will edit with ID. And then boom, it changes to that almost wireframe type view. I can still see the roads, I can still see the boxes, but they're superimposed on that imagery. And I'm quite lucky that the imagery for here is really, really good. When I first started mapping and wanted to map my village, when I zoomed in here, this just looked like mush. It was very low resolution Landsat imagery, and you could just about tell there was some gray stuff where there was a town. And if I panned to the right a little bit, I saw the really nice imagery cut off, and I was like, oh, I'm on the edge of the world in OpenStreetMap. I can't do anything yet. Now, something I should add is, you don't always have to interact with OpenStreetMap from your desktop. You could go out with a GPS unit and take tracks or roads and upload those. And some people might find that a little bit more intimidating, but that is also a good way to do this. We've worked with groups who've like hiked in Nepal, and that's how they've gathered their data for some of these areas. So it's a pretty cool way to do it, but this is a little bit maybe less intimidating. But what we find is the free imagery that's made available from Bing and Digital Globe and ESRI, it's becoming, the high resolution stuff is becoming more prevalent all over the world. So there's places that I map in that every time I go there, there's new imagery, there's clearer imagery, there's better imagery. So if the place you've chosen doesn't have good imagery, don't despair, keep checking, because one day it may just pop up and you'll have that really high resolution stuff. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit more here. So you'll see there are some buildings mapped, pretty much all of the roads are mapped, but only some buildings, and I would like to add to that. Okay. So I'll start with a building, because I feel like that's the easiest thing to do. I have 3 tools up here that allow me to create areas. So that's anything that is big enough to have shape. That can be a house, a parking lot, a playground, pretty much anything that takes up area. Lines I use for linear features, roads, railways, power lines. If you can see them, you can map those. And waterways. And sometimes people ask, they're like, well, when do I switch from area to line when it comes to water features? Because as you all know, rivers have area, they're just not skinny things. And usually what we do in OpenStreetMap is we start with the simpler version, so we try to capture things like rivers as lines first, and then when we have the time, we go back and we capture them as areas, so that we have both versions available. So if somebody needs to use the data later, they can decide, do I just want the rivers that are lines, because maybe I'm making a map of the entire country, and that works better for my map. Or if they're doing a more local project and they need to see the whole river, the Hudson, the Potomac, whatever, in all its glory, they might take the area data from there. So there's 2 ways you can go about that. Points we use to capture many things that you could also capture as an area. Again, it's quicker and easier to add. You don't have to deal with the drawing, the geometry of the building itself. And many times, point data actually comes from data that's collected in the field. So somebody might go out with an app on their phone or a GPS unit, and they might capture the name of a school, stand in front of a school, take the point, in front of a business, take the point, something like that. And we like to have room for all these things. So you may see a building that has 3 or 4 points in front of it because that building might have 3 or 4 businesses within it. So it's kind of a dual way to capture some of these things. But remote mappers typically don't work in points. We work in the areas and the lines. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in and I am going to capture this building here. So I'm going to click on the area tool. And what you basically do is you click at each corner. Okay, I didn't do that very well. I would also suggest using a mouse for this. I'm not good at tracing with a trackpad. Maybe you're better than me, but I'm having to do it this morning. So you click on each corner, and when you come to the last corner, you double click. And the building will highlight and pulse a little bit. And that means, okay, what's next? Tell me what I am. When you trace it to begin with, it's just an area. And as I said, that can be anything from a playground to a building to an industrial site to a forest. You have to bestow it with what we call a tag or attribute information or a label as such in order for the mapping software to what we call symbolize or visualize it properly. Because depending on how you label or tag it, that's how OpenStreetMap will color it on the final map. So little buildings will be gray, car parks will be a slightly different gray, forests will be green, those kind of things. So you're the one that will dictate how it will be symbolized in the final map. Now over here, we have an entire library of what we call tags. And rather than trying to dig down through it, it's got a really good search function. And we try to be conservative as remote mappers. And unless you are intimately familiar with that neighborhood and can say, oh, I know that is a residential house, or I know that's commercial and that's Pete's coffee shop, or whatever, we try to label our buildings as just building. We don't try to guess. We can always incorporate fieldwork to make it more detailed later on, but we always want to start off with the most basic attribution as possible. So right now, I'm going to call that building, even though I do know that's actually a house. It's a house with a really, really good pub in it. Really old building. I know that this is a house. I know that this is a shop. So I can put that in there and I can put the name in. I'm not going to do it right now, but we'll tag it as building. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to square it. So we try where possible to keep the geometry of what we contribute as regular as possible. Now, things aren't always regular in real life, but we try our best because when we go to print a map, it looks a little bit better. You have to realize this isn't engineering quality surveying here, okay? This is like data that's what we call fit for purpose, pretty good for most things. And keeping it clean is quite important. So we want to incorporate as much of the shape as the building as possible, but maybe not each little dormer window or something like that. So you kind of, there's like a middle ground there. So what helps us with the quality of our tracing is this squaring tool. So I'm going to click S and it will square the building. I'm going to draw another one here, but draw it not so well, just to show you how squaring works. So say I do that, not a great square. You have to tag it first. And then if I hit S, it squares it for me. Now, when it squared it, it kind of off-centered it a little bit. So I can use another shortcut, M for move. And when I hit M, there he goes. It lets me move it a little bit so I can sit it in the right place, okay? So those, I think, are probably two of the best little tricks or shortcuts on your keyboard that will help you map. Now, up here, we have the Save button. It's really important that you save your work regularly as you go along. I've had students sit in the classroom and get up to like 250 edits. They've got their tunes on, their head is down, and they're just cranking it out, and then, I don't know, the computer crashes. This has happened many times, and that work gets lost. So please save regularly. It's just get into the nervous habit of doing that. I think you can do Control S, maybe that might like push it. But you don't need to save after every building because that creates a lot of traffic on the server. Every dozen or so is probably good, or maybe even 20. However many you are okay with losing, let's say, should the internet hiccup. And especially in rooms where we have a lot of people on the same Wi-Fi, it's a good idea to save regularly. When you click on Save, you're asked for something called a change set comment. And what that is any sort of additional information that you can give the community or other potential mappers in your area about that data. It could be something as simple as I traced from Bing imagery, I traced from digital globe imagery, to something as simple as I traced buildings and roads, there was clouds in this imagery, you know, beware if you're working there. It can be super personal and colloquial, but it just helps other people understand why you made what you made in that particular area. Now, we'll talk about something called the tasking manager a little bit later, where there's a way to auto-populate this with hashtags and things like that. You know, if your class is mapping as a group and you want to create a hashtag for your project, do that and put that in here, because it creates what we call metadata. And then we can go back and we can search for all the edits that says, you know, Miss Kai's class number 211 or 2018 or something like that, and we can go back and track for all that work. So it's nice to have that. So you'll see that this is saving some of the hashtags that I used for like some of my latest work. They're not relevant here. So I'm just going to say traced from Bing, added a house. And it might seem goofy to you, but that's good for us to have in there. And then I'm going to click upload. So that's some very, very basic tracing. I'm just going to give you some more navigation tools here, and then we'll proceed to doing some mapping on the floor together before Richard introduces Tasking Manager. To the right, you've probably already discovered that we've got our tools for zooming in and zooming out, which are obviously very important. If you're using a mouse, which I recommend to be the best way of navigating, the rollerball just allows you to zoom in and out, which is my favorite way to do this. This little widget here, the background settings, this is gold. There's a lot of good stuff in here. This tells you all the background imagery that you have available for where you're mapping right now, okay? And depending on your location, this could be as brief as 4 imagery sources, or in my case here, there's several, because some of the national agencies in Ireland have made like historical maps and things like that available to trace from, which is pretty cool, and it's going to be different no matter where you are. For the most part, we default to tracing from Bing. Bing, as you know, is a Microsoft initiative, and many times Bing, the imagery that they get actually comes directly from the satellite provider Digital Globe. So it's kind of funny that you will also have Digital Globe Premium and Digital Globe Standard imagery available for the same area. And what I find is when I jump between them, I often see that they're just images from different timestamps, because you'll notice buildings will have appeared or buildings will have changed. And Premium isn't always available for everywhere. Well, it is for here. Another important thing to mention is, when you jump between the image sources, there can be offset. Does everyone know what that means, offset? That how the imagery was captured and lined up may be just a little bit off. So it makes your data look like it's a little bit misplaced. And what I generally do is I have my students align it to Bing, and then if they want to use any of the other sources, they can move that background imagery. Do not stress about that right now. We'll show you how to do that later. Not a big deal, but just want to show you how this works. Now, this thing down here, custom, is really interesting, and if we have time a little later, I'll show you guys what some really good high-resolution imagery looks like. So some of the places that my group are working with right now in the World Bank, the free imagery that we have is not very good. We're tracing informal settlements that are really, really close together, that it's really hard to see walkways and where one building starts and another ends. So we've got local drone providers have gone out and captured that imagery. And we have this wonderful drone imagery that we want to use rather than the free stuff. So you can host your own imagery online. There's something called Open Aerial Map. And you can copy the link from Open Aerial Map in here and trace from that instead. So if you have an alternate source of imagery, you can bring it in here. And again, it's not very hard to do. Open Aerial Map is something that you might want to pull up a tab and investigate when you have a little bit of time. You would be surprised your hometowns may have imagery, because so many people fly drones now recreationally, and they just do it for the pleasure of it, and they don't necessarily have a use case for the data, and they will host it or push it up for the public good on Open Drone Map. And then that will allow you to pull it into OpenStreetMap and use it. So it's really another really, really cool initiative by this community. Just to scooch down a little here, if the area you're mapping in, the imagery might just seem, you know, maybe a little bit dark, or it's really hard to discern between the different land cover types or the building information, you can play around with the brightness and the contrast and the saturation of that imagery, and it can be really helpful. So it doesn't matter if you make it look garish, if it helps you decipher a roof from tarmac, you know, and maybe different types of vegetation. And you can make it look completely, you know, Andy Warhol here, but it works. Down here, the imagery offset, this is where you can play around with how the imagery is aligned. We might leave that be for now, but that's something that as we walk around the floor, we can demonstrate to you. And the final thing I want to bring to your attention on here is the help tools. Sometimes we need a reminder. Maybe it's been a few weeks since we've traced, or maybe you're trying to get a colleague interested, or you haven't a lot of time the first time that you're showing your students how to do it. This little help section, it's simple, it's quick, it's thorough, and there's really good little links to outside. But one of my favorite parts here is this thing called the walkthrough. And I'm going to request that everybody that is a brand new mapper goes through this before they start to contribute anything on the map. So when you click on walkthrough, it's basically an interactive process where it makes you trace a building, a road, and at a point, and it walks you through working with the little search library in order to tag. And you can go back to the walkthrough at any point. The data you create isn't going to be saved, but it gives you that kind of simulated experience. And I love this when I'm working with a class or I'm showing people how to do this for the first time. So we're going to take some free time mapping. We'll all walk the floor. We want to get everybody working on the walkthrough. And when we finish that, we want you to add a building or two to your neighborhood. And then Richard will come back up and tell you about Tasking Manager and how we coordinate bigger projects. Okay?
All right, everybody. How are we doing? Still loving life? OSM is awesome? Awesome as a possum in autumn? All right, so the next part we want to talk about with OSM is this creation that the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team created called Tasking Manager. Nuala talked a bit about it at the beginning, but a problem that was found fairly early on when OSM was taking off, and especially within the humanitarian community, when a disaster strikes somewhere. And as you're seeing, when you're mapping an individual area, it's fine. And a lot of people are mapping in their own backyard. You don't live in the same backyard, so you're not having any problems. But what if you have 20, 50, 100, 200 people from around the world all focusing their energy and their edits in one area because there was a typhoon to the Philippines or an earthquake in Nepal or in Haiti? How do you make the best use of their time? How do you sort of organize this group of people that are literally around the world and contributing, and not have them duplicating their efforts and not creating conflicts? Because if I'm tracing a building in my home and then somebody in England is tracing the same building and we both try to push things up to the OSM platform, it's going to kick back an error because it says, wait, this building already exists. And those conflicts can be very difficult and messy. So to assist with that problem, the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team created something called the Tasking Manager. And the Tasking Manager basically allows a group of individuals to focus their work in one area, but try to minimize the number of times you step on somebody else's toes. So basically, you set up a project, and we'll talk to you guys and show you how to do that throughout the course of this weekend. You can set up a project for a particular piece of geography, right? So you outline where you want the area that you want mapped to be identified. And then the Tasking Manager will actually grid out, actually make a bunch of squares of that area. So when you have mappers come to your site or come to this tasking project, they would actually select a square, and I'll sort of demo this with one of our projects here in a second. And then you sort of check out that square. The software then launches you into OpenStreetMap. So if you're working on a project through Tasking Manager, your first stop isn't OpenStreetMap, it's actually the Tasking Manager. Because from the Tasking Manager, you'll then be launched into OpenStreetMap to do your tracing. Because the Tasking Manager, once you select that area to map, will actually take you to that area in OSM, zoom you right to that area, and actually identify that little box. So you know, as long as you stay inside your box, you have a much less chance of actually tracing something that somebody else has done, or tracing something that somebody's currently editing, and you have less conflicts. And so the way the Tasking Manager is created, is set up, is that you have a number of projects in there. So you can have multiple projects for a number of different places. Now, the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team created this right around 2010 or so. And then it was a great tool, but a lot of us started using it, and we found that there was some upgrades we wanted to make. Not only us as educators, we started using it, but other people that were in the industry, be it from the State Department, USAID, the World Bank. So we actually, I think it was Nuala, you started the ball rolling. We got had a meeting of everybody actually in our department at the Department of Geography, because luckily a lot of the players were actually in DC. And magically, all these people that are usually very busy all had a time in DC at the same time come to our office. We hosted them, and we had people from the State Department, the Humanitarian Information Unit at the State Department, the World Bank. We were there, the American Red Cross were there, OTI, Office of Transition Initiatives, with USAID were there, all in the room, and we all had these asks of, oh, Tasking Manager is great, can we make some improvements? And who has money to put in to actually make these improvements, because this stuff costs money. So we talked to our folks at GW, and we were able to kick in a little bit of money, and literally, as Nuala would say, we passed a hat around to see who had money to contribute. And we eventually got a pot of money where we could make upgrades to this Tasking Manager. But one of the asks that we had specifically was to make one for TeachOSM. So the hot Tasking Manager is sort of reserved for humanitarian efforts, all right? So projects that the hot community is actually working on. But we have a lot of instances, like for us and for you guys, where you want to be able to coordinate a mapping effort with a bunch of volunteers, students, or some other group you're working with, and have them sort of manage their work in a sort of logical way. So one of the asks that was thankfully given with this upgrade was that it actually make an identical copy of the Tasking Manager, and we'll call it TeachOSM Tasking Manager. So that's the one we're going to be demoing today. All right, so actually I'm going to jump out and actually very, very briefly, I'm going to demo it in a second, but the two projects we have set up in the Teach Tasking Manager, I just want to talk very briefly about that before we jump into one of those. The first one is Nogales. The city of Nogales, there's a US side in Arizona and then the Mexican side in Mexico. It's a border town, the largest border town in Arizona. You'll see that the Mexican side has grown quite a lot. Well, you'll see that it's quite much larger than the US side. The US side, population-wise, has been very stable. Over the last couple of decades, the Mexican side of the border actually has grown considerably. I think between 1990 and 2000, it grew about 50%. But also borders the Coronado National Forest. So there's a lot of urban development south of the border going on, but it's not very well mapped. So that's one of the areas we're going to work on to get that mapped. And those who were here last time, we were using the same project at that point. The second project we're going to look at, and you guys get to choose which project you want to work on, is one in Albany, Georgia. In the last couple of years, the landscape has changed a lot because it was hit by 2 hurricanes and a tornado. So the landscape has changed a lot, and there's a need for new and updated maps for this region. And it'll be a while. The US is not a place that we often use a lot of mapping for humanitarian use OSM in a humanitarian context because it is so well mapped. But when things change drastically, it's going to take a little while to get this mapped. And we want to keep OSM as updated as possible. So we're going to be working or focusing our efforts on this place as well. Let me see here if I can jump out. All right, so let me, I'll just type in Nogales. All right, how do I escape? All right. Give me a second here. It's not my computer, so I'm trying to figure out. I use a PC, not an Apple. That's my excuse. There's your Chrome. All right, perfect. Okay, so the website is very similar to the Hot Tasking Manager. Is for Teach. It's tasks.teachosm.org. And when you come in, you'll get this sort of splash page. Give me some basic information. And the cool thing what they've linked up here is that your OSM account will give you access to this site. So I'm going to log in here first. Again, in the upper right-hand corner, you can log in with your... Here we are. Oh, I'll be Kerry Mapper today. I'll pretend I'm from Kerry, Ireland. So when we get here, you can simply go to Start Mapping. And then it has a bunch of default sort of cards here for projects that are going on. As I mentioned, we're going to focus on 2. There are a number of projects that are going on right now. And I'm just going to type in the search bar here, Nogales. And it comes up with the job. You can type in the number 293 or Nogales. It'll look for those keywords and bring up the project. If there's more than one project with those keywords you're typing in, sorry, yeah, it's tasks, so TASKS .teachosm.org. Sorry, I went through that quickly. And it's hard to see the URL up there.
Has got all that information as well. It's got the URLs and the task numbers because we know there's a lot of numbers and things.
So as you move to this site, what I suggest is actually you close any tabs you have with OSM. Save any edits you're still making. Save those edits in OSM, then close that tab. Because I mentioned earlier, the tasking manager will actually open up a brand new tab of OSM. So the one I'm going to is Nogales. If you want to look at the Albany one instead, that's fine. You'll see different imagery, but the same setup. So I've typed in Nogales in the search box here, hit enter, and then it brings up the one card that we have here. So we get a brief description of this project, but as we tap into it, we'll actually have a much deeper description. Okay, so when you go to a task, if you're taking out a task, you want to work either in Hot Tasking Manager or here, you'll want to make sure you read through this description because it will describe exactly what the situation is, give you some context, but also describe what it is you're supposed to be tracing. Some tasks only want you to trace buildings. Some will say buildings and roads. As best as you can, when you start working on a task, please stick to what the task project manager has asked for. Now, as I scroll down, okay, it scrolls the opposite way, right on. Learning curve here with an apple. As you scroll down, right, you'll see further instructions on the left-hand side. And we always say to make sure before you start clicking and tracing, read the instructions. Okay? Make sure you identify and you fully understand what is to be mapped and get some context for what we're mapping and why we're mapping it. Now, on the right-hand side, you'll see a map, an OSM map of the area. You'll see this grid. This is the grid I was talking about. So the project manager identified an area on OSM that they wanted to map or focus their efforts on. And through creating this project, you got to identify the size of the squares, okay, and how big those squares are. And that's something we'll get into more when we have you guys creating projects. But you'll see the squares are a number of different colors. Those colors all mean different things. We look over in the bottom left of the map. If one is completely blank, that means it's ready, open, and waiting for somebody to select it. If it is yellow, that means somebody or a number of people have already been in there and have mapped everything that's been asked. For instance, if we're only asking for buildings, if it's tagged as yellow or colored as yellow, that means all the buildings in that particular square have been mapped, so don't bother going there. Sometimes you'll get an area that has some bad imagery. Maybe there's 50% of the area is covered in clouds, or it's too blurry, right? The resolution is too low. You can simply mark it as bad imagery, so hopefully next time there's no more imagery, or maybe some aerial imagery, or some drone imagery is available, you can map that area. Validated, that's something we haven't really talked about yet. Once an area is mapped, validation needs to occur, okay? And validation basically is having another person, sort of a second set of eyes, looking at the edits that you've created or your students have created and ensure that the edits were done properly, that buildings are marked as buildings, the corners are squared, the roads intersect each other and are not going through houses. So like with our students, we're the validators. So myself, Nuala, and Stephen have an OSM assignment with our students, and then we're the validators because we go through, we actually give them a grade, but we actually sort of fix. And even though you tell students, how to map, we teach them how to map. Several times I've gotten data where there's somebody's house and then they have a road going through it, which doesn't reflect reality, but I'm not sure why they would do that. But when I check it, it did come back as their edits and they had a road going through it. So, sometimes there's bad edits and sometimes they're by mistake. So we're there to fix it. So a validator, again, is somebody else. So you can't finish a task and then go back and validate it yourself. It has to be a different user. But this is how sort of some of the quality control comes into the edits that are made to OSM. If a validator goes in and realizes, okay, you marked it as done, and I'm trying to validate this work, but it's really, really bad. All the polygons, all the square houses or rectangular houses all look like trapezoids, and they're all leaning, and they're all wrong. There's a bunch of edits. You can invalidate it, okay? And you can actually message the user, the OSM user that actually created those edits and say, hey, thanks for contributing, but you left a lot of buildings that weren't squared. Can you please go back and square them up? Okay, and this is done through the OSM interface. One that's blue, the bottom two that are blue, one is sort of a lighter blue, the other one's a darker blue or has a dark blue outline. Those that are locked, those are ones that are locked. So the one that is just blue is simply locked by another user on this particular task. If it's blue with a dark blue outline, that's the one you've locked. So once you select one, it becomes locked by you. Once you select one and start editing, I should say, it becomes locked by you. So when you're looking for a task to work on, and say we have all of you guys working on Nogales, as people start selecting these squares, they're going to turn blue. You'll see them turn blue on your screen. The one that's blue with the dark blue outline is the one that's actually locked by yourself, okay, that you've locked yourself. You notice in this particular project, we have this pink polygon in the middle. That's an area of priority. So another thing you can actually add, if you want this entire area mapped, but first and the highest priority is a particular portion of this geography, you can outline that with this pink area, right? So if you can, map in there first. Sometimes or oftentimes with new mappers, going to the core dense downtown area may be a little overwhelming, so we'll often tell them start on the outside edge where you have individual buildings that are easier to pick out, and as you get more confident with your tracing and your tagging, move into more detailed areas and areas that are a little more densely populated. All right, so I'm going to say I've read all of this fun stuff, and I'm going to select one of these. And again, you can zoom in, whoops, or zoom out. Hit the right button here. Another thing you can do with a task, if you zoom in somewhere and you realize that, wow, this is a lot of information, too much information for me to do, say, in a half an hour to an hour, you can actually split the task. And that's what happens here. The square that's actually made up of 4 smaller squares, you can actually split that and give yourself sort of smaller pieces of geography to work on. It makes it a little more digestible. And you can split to several levels, but just be mindful, you want to make sure the piece of geography you're working on actually includes several buildings. You don't want to get the squares so small that you're cutting the buildings in half all the time. And a general rule of thumb, even though you're working in your area, if the building is at least 50% in your square, right, then you map it. If only a portion of it, say 25% of it's in your square, leave it for the person working in the next square, okay, just to help avoid conflicts. All right, so I'm just going to zoom out just a skosh here. I'm going to pick this guy up here. All right, so I've selected this guy. All right, he turns blue. Oh, someone else selected that before me. All right, someone's quick to the trigger.
A big group mapping together, like 50, 60 people. We yesterday had 150 at a Mapathon. It's like, who can grab it first? You're trying to get a cell and other people are grabbing it, so that happened to him there. And if you don't mind zooming out a little bit, Richard, you'll see, if you guys start to grab them, see how like all these little blues are popping up? That's you guys. So you're all coordinated on this one, and they're popping up here and there.
All right, so once you select one, it turns yellow, and I can click on Start Mapping. And this changes the screen. Here on the left-hand side, if I get to it, you see I have my split task here. There's no unsplit, so just be mindful of that. Don't split, 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 split. There's no unsplit. So if I'm happy with this square, you see that it's turned blue. Reselect task from asking, all right. And then up in the upper part here, we can actually choose the editor. There are a number of editors you can use to contribute to OSM. We're going to be using ID editor, which is the one the most widely used one now. So I'm going to say Start Editor. And you notice it opened up a brand new tab. Right? That's why I was suggesting earlier that you close OSM that you had open earlier, because Tasking Manager will open up a brand new tab and bring me right to that area. Notice the pink box, right? The pink box is very important because that's where we're telling you to keep all your edits inside that pink box. This is going to keep your edits separated from somebody else, reduce the number of conflicts, okay? So now any edits I make, I will do inside this pink box. That make sense? So again, when we're editing in OSM, we're already in edit mode. I can zoom in. I can zoom in. And what I like to do, especially if it's a larger piece of geography, I usually start in the, whoops, accidentally moved that node. Let me move that back. I usually start, say, in the northwest corner and then work west to east, back and forth. Okay? Because what I want to do is capture everything I can in my square that I've chosen. And again, anything that's in my area, I'm going to trace. So this building here, I would trace in the top. This guy here, even though he's coming into my area, I'm not going to trace it because I have less than 50% of that building. I'm going to leave it to somebody else. Whoever's taking that square north of me, that's their job to trace, not mine. And the same rules apply that Newell was mentioning earlier. When you do 5, 10, maybe 15 edits at most, save. I've had students, I walk by them, they're in Mapathon, they've got like 45 edits, they haven't saved, they try and save. By that time, there are conflicts, and oftentimes you have to start from scratch. Because one of the things to remember, if you're doing buildings, individual buildings, 10, 15 edits, then save is fine. If you are editing roads, right? This road is fine here, but notice how I've selected this road. It goes from my square into the next square. So we have two people in different squares. I'm staying in my square, they're staying in their square, but we're editing the same road at the same time, we can still get a conflict. So if I'm editing roads, I will typically make 1 or 2 edits, save right away. Buildings that are in my area that are not connected to anything else, I can do 15 edits, hit save, it's fine. But if you're using roads, because they connect outside of your area, I would maybe make a couple edits, then hit save right away. Once you've done your editing, okay, so say you've mapped everything in your square, you've double-checked it, all your buildings are square, you've covered every building, you've done all the roads connect to each other, and you're really happy with it, you're giving yourself a good pat in the back, that's awesome, you've saved everything. Once you've done that, you need to go back to Tasking Manager. Okay? So we're starting Tasking Manager, we go to OSM, when we're done our mapping, we go back to Tasking Manager. From here, we have a couple options. Well, we have a few options. If we've done all the mapping, then obviously we don't have to mark it as bad imagery. Okay? If we're done mapping and we've completed everything, absolutely everything that is asked for, everything is completed, we're happy with it, we're going to say mark completely mapped. That will change it to yellow, so nobody else will go in there and map it. However, if you've done all you can, maybe you have a meeting to go to, maybe you have something else to do, maybe you get tired, or maybe it's too much for you to do in one sitting. So you've done a bunch of mapping, but you are done mapping for the time being, but the whole task isn't done, then you simply say stop mapping. That will release it so somebody else can actually click on it and start mapping. Your edits will obviously already be saved in OSM, but you're letting it know, let people know that, okay, there's still mapping to go here. I've done some stuff, but there's still some mapping to do. So when I say stop mapping, it changes to white. Now anybody else can select that and pick up where I left off. All right, so that's a big differentiation because if you click completely mapped, it's going to turn yellow, and then the next person to look at it is going to be a validator. And if they see that it's only half mapped, they're going to invalidate it and say thanks for your edits, but then it's still leaving edits to be done. So is that clear with everybody? Because that's the problem sometimes some of the students run into. Yep.
moving through this, just wave. You know, we're throwing a ton of information at you in a very short period, but we have this open time so that you can say, can you remind me of that again? Please show me that again. Or maybe ask questions of how this is or isn't relative or useful for your particular class. And the idea is that you could create one of these setups for your class, for your town or somewhere that you're interested in mapping, so that your students can stay away from each other and not overlap. So this isn't something that just we make. The whole idea of TeachOSM was that you could use these tools for you, for your projects, and it didn't have to be someone at USAID or the Red Cross.
And while you're here, we will actually make you project managers so you all can make your projects when you go home if you choose to do so. And for that, we'll be collecting all your OSM usernames. In fact, if you wanted to email those, start emailing those to me now, we can start getting that done. My email is just rhinton, my first initial last name, rhinton@gwu.edu. And if you want to email me your OSM username, be mindful that the OSM usernames are case sensitive. All right, my OSM username is RAH, capital RAH, and it's lowercase, the rest of it. They are case sensitive. So at this point, we would like you guys to start mapping either Nogales or Albany. And so as a reminder, we first started at the tasking manager, so tasks, tasks.teachosm.org. You need to log in with your OSM username. Click on Start Mapping, and you can search for either Albany or Nogales. Oops, no projects. Spell it correctly. Once you select a task, please read through the instructions, right, to identify exactly what it is we were trying to do, and then start mapping. Remember to close any OpenStreetMap tabs you have open up to begin with. This will open up a brand new one for you. All right, we're going to hit the floor and get you guys going on that.
I think our task started with Bing. And if you go down through Digital Globe Premium or Digital Globe Standard, you'll see we have different quality in terms of like sharpness. And one of the people I was working with, we noticed as we changed between them, there was actually new buildings that hadn't been there before. So obviously, I think it was the Digital Globe Standard seemed to maybe be a bit newer. I can't exactly remember which one, but there was definitely a temporal difference between those images. So we decided that we would go ahead and trace with that. What happens when you have a distinct shift? So if you can look up and you can see this little jump, yeah? They definitely aren't aligned the same way. Now, what if somebody has put considerable effort into tracing using Bing, because that was what we used as the authoritative imagery the first time we did this, because I think maybe the other two weren't even available at the time. Do we move everything? That's a huge undertaking, because sometimes we work in cities where mapping has gone on for years using possibly Bing, then this new wonderful drone imagery or this new wonderful high-resolution satellite imagery shows up, and you're like, that's tens of thousands of buildings I have to move. So in many cases, we often decide that we will trace using the new imagery, but we will align that new imagery to what the majority of the stuff has been traced to. So we align it to Bing. So in this instance here, Bing, even though I guess there's a lot of different things going on, Bing seems to have the roads captured pretty well. But what we might like to try and do is, or I'll make an example. Let me trace one building to show you what I mean. I probably haven't picked the best square for this. I should have picked a square that was already really well mapped. So this won't be a problem you will have anywhere, but it's a very confusing thing to deal with when you do come across. All right, so I have my building here, and so I changed to Digital Globe Premium, and it's offset a tiny bit, Digital Globe Standard. I guess this part isn't so bad, but what you can do is you can go down here on Digital Globe Standard, and there's this imagery offset. And you can work in here, and you can move the imagery. So it's doing it like very, very, very gently, but if you can see, I can adjust the wallpaper. Consider the imagery to actually be a wallpaper that you're using to trace. You can adjust the wallpaper to match the majority of the infrastructure that's already there, and then you add on top of that. So you're not forced to have to move all the work that the other people did. You're just aligning the most recent imagery to the vast majority of the work that's already completed. It can be a little hard to have to make that decision. Hold on, I'm not doing this very well. But now this is aligned to Bing. So I can use this better imagery to do my subsequent traces, and it should match with the existing stuff that's already there. Again, that one is a little bit complicated, so we'll walk the floor, and if you're seeing that, I know some folks, the adjustment in the part of town they were working on was much more than that. It was like half a building, and other parts it's not. So that will tell you that this misalignment of imagery is not a consistent thing throughout an entire town. It's kind of a little bit unusual. So those of you who jump between and notice that, oh my God, these two images, they make a massive jump, make sure you put a hand up, and we will help you align that, because your students could encounter that for your town or someplace that you're working in. And it's something that you try to investigate. If you've picked an area to map, you try to investigate this phenomenon beforehand so that you know if that's a piece of additional instruction you have to give your students. We obviously didn't investigate really well. We tested it for some parts, and we didn't see anything. But somebody was mapping around the edge, and that offset was huge, and we hadn't caught that. So we'll treat it as a learning moment. So.
Okay, we're just a little behind schedule, so I want to proceed with just the next piece. Everybody's working away on the tasking manager. You've all kind of pointed to... What's that? Sorry. Oh, okay, sorry. Everybody's chipping away or working with the tasking manager. So far, we've introduced two tools. We've introduced the ID editor, which we've been using. We practiced on that first. We went through the walkthrough. The second tool we introduced is the tasking manager. The good thing about the tasking manager is that you can select a task. You can go direct your students directly to the tasking manager, coach them through a ready-made task, and you can use that yourself and get started with open mapping anywhere. The other thing you can do is we will give you the magic powers to lay on hands, and you'll be able to create your own projects. And I wanted to give you a quick walkthrough on how we do that. There's two bits to this piece of this. What we want to be able to do is be able to help you to stay current with your own mapping, but also the next step is like, hey, this open mapping stuff is really cool. How do I apply it to my AP Human Geography courses? How do I take this open mapping and apply it to economic development or urban and or rural land uses, things like that? So this is kind of your first step in how to create those projects yourself. So we will we'll share this out. So what makes a good mapping project? We want to show some direct context for the piece of work. We want to show that this work that we're doing in Albany, Georgia connects with community development and economic resilience and recovery. We want to show that digitizing in Nogales helps acquaint us with population and demographic trends on both sides of the border. So this is our kind of our entree to do this. We do this in two places, and Nuala said this just a few minutes ago. If you look at any of the task descriptions, you'll notice there are two parts to it. The top is a description, and the top part says what and why. What are we doing? We're mapping Nogales, Arizona. Why are we doing it? Because border issues are important and there's economic development that occurs on both sides. The second piece of this are the instructions. The instructions tell you how to do this. So I want you to, this is where you provide information to your students. I want you to digitize buildings only. And you can specify what you want, and you can tick some boxes in the tasking manager in order to do that. So there's two pieces, the what and the why that goes in the description, and then the how that goes in the instructions. Here's the description. Here's an example that we've got, and I'm not going to read all of this here, but this is essentially the what and the why. You can follow along if you want to on your laptops and look at some of the tasks. You can even call up this example here if you want to search for Project 242 and see the description in here. It's kind of useful. In this description, we have put links to background materials. So if you call up this task 242, you'll notice that there's some links that we've put in the tasking manager, and you can do this for your students. You can post a link to a New York Times or Washington Post or a National Geographic article that describes what the issues are on the ground. So for this one in Louisiana, we're talking about coastal subsidence and sea level rise and erosion. What are the issues to this community? Here's a community of Native Americans who've lived there for 200 years. What are the issues and why are we digitizing this? So you can see down at the bottom here, we've got some links that go to Wikipedia that describe it. We've got some other, we've got a link there to a background article on coastal zone erosion in Louisiana. So you can embed these kinds of instructional materials in this descriptive text. Here I've kind of bracketed a bit of it where we've got the project description goes there and the links to the external resources. So this is where you would add these sorts of things. Now, the instructions are the other piece. We've gone through this before with the tasking manager and what's on there, but all of this describes instructions. This says you are to digitize roads only, or you are to digitize buildings only, or whatever the task is, you can say, here's what it is and how, this is how we're going to approach these kinds of things. Use this imagery, square your buildings, connect all roads, name all roads, those sorts of instructions. This is where you would put that in there. More detailed instructions. By the way, we'll pass along all these worksheets so that you can use these things. Tasking Manager login and access, we've already gone through this, but it's up in the upper right-hand corner. In order to do any of this, of course, you have to log into the Tasking Manager using your OSM credentials. I encourage you also, as teachers, to fill out your user profile. And this is important because there is a mechanism in the Tasking Manager where students can contact the project manager, and you are the project managers. So an email from a student that says, hey, I don't know how to do this or whatever, students can email you directly as project managers and get in touch with you and say, I don't know what to do with this thing, or there's bad imagery here, or how do I do this sort of thing? I encourage you to fill out your user profiles on this as you get into this, because it's an important way for your students to contact you during the mapping process and to give them, to kind of provide one point of contact for this. It also helps to, you'll get a better experience and training for first-time users if you've got some way for them to contact you. Okay, so under this, after you've logged into this, there's, you'll see under the bottom circle up there, there's a way to create a new project. So once we've given you the magic powers and bestowed this on you, you can go in, log in, and you can say create new project, and you can define an area and be able to create it. Let's walk through that a little bit here. We open it up and we've defined some project extents. You'll see you come into the world and you have to kind of zoom into Albany, Georgia and draw a box around it in order to get it. Then you'll be able to create the task squares. And this is a very simple operation. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a kind of a breadcrumb trail to guide you through the process. It's very, very simple. But you can create a certain, create a bunch of boxes, and you can say, oh, well, here's a dense urban core where there's a lot of features. You can split the tasks into different smaller polygons. So in very dense areas, you can create smaller polygons so that you don't get overwhelmed with thousands and thousands of features that you have to digitize in there. You can trim this to the area of interest as well, which is an optional step. I like to do it. For those of you who are participating in the Great County Mapping Contest, I took the county outlines and I trimmed the contest extents to the counties so that no one was digitizing outside of their county for that event. So it's a useful feature that you can do. Once you've created these task squares, you can name your project. You can name it, Albany, Georgia Community Resilience, or disaster recovery, whatever. You can give it a name, or it could be Lewiston, Maine commercial digitizing, or whatever your project name is. You can just give it a little name in there. Your short description is a concise summary of the project purpose, and we've kind of highlighted it in that box below. It just gives people a handle in order to grab the project very quickly. It's typically no more than 1 or 2 sentences that you put up there. The details will come down at the bottom. You can put brackets around URLs, and that will enable like live linking to those external resources through there. Instructions, this is where you can select entities to map. You can kind of restrict the task, you can tailor the task, you can constrain it, you can expand it, and just specify what you want to have digitized in there. And you can also pre-populate the change set comments. You'll notice when you were saving your work, there was a line in there with a bunch of hashtags in there. So we put those in there before we set these jobs up. We put those hashtags in there so that when you saved your work, it automatically came up and it said TeachOSM task 342 and Mapathon, Geography 2050 Mapathon, whatever. We put all that stuff in there, pre-populate it so that you won't have to. And all you have to do is tell your students to add their typical change set comments where they're adding 10 buildings or connecting roads or realigning this or that or the other. Metadata is an important piece of this. It helps us to not just audit things, which is a very useful thing in terms of data quality, but it's also useful, that's useful to actually find your students' work and to actually grade their work, to assess their data quality. It also enables us to do cool things. If we have hashtags in our change set comments, we can do cool things like find all the hashtags where it says Geography 2050 Mapathon. We can tally those up and we can say, oh, we had 852 change sets, 9,000 buildings, 22,000 nodes. We can start to do things, some interesting statistics with those hashtags and to track things. We have used it at George Washington University. There hasn't been a map-off for a while, I think, but we have in the past had students add their school hashtags so it's George Washington University and George Mason University, but when we have a map off, we can say, okay, who's got the most change sets? It's for bragging rights, of course, but we can do those sorts of things to kind of gamify the competition and to it helps to kind of, it's a little bit competitive, but it's a little fun way to kind of track those sorts of things. So it's fun and it's useful to do those sorts of things. Okay, so I've just kind of walked through how you would create your projects. Now we're going to turn it around and we're going to do what you just did. How are your students going to consume this? And they're going to consume it just like you did before. Now I've put this in here. Here's this idealized mapping workflow. At the top, we're starting with the tasking manager. We're approaching things through the tasking manager like your students will. When they click on a square, it moves to that second box. It goes into the ID editor. We invoke the ID editor. We do all our digitizing. We make all our changes. We align all our roads. And we save everything. Then we go back to the tasking manager and we either mark it complete or we stop mapping, one of those two decisions in there. So we start with the tasking manager, move to the ID editor, and close with the tasking manager again. So this is kind of the ideal workflow. I've broken out the steps in the boxes for you to see, but that's kind of a blow-by-blow how your students would consume this. And also, if you're using a ready-made task from any of the tasking managers, the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap, TeachOSM, or the regular plain old vanilla OSM, you will use this same workflow regardless of the tasking manager that you're using. So your students are going to do much like you did. They're going to open up the tasking manager and they're going to select a task. So they're going to select a task that's white, that hasn't been done before, and they're going to add all of the features in there. They're going to select the task. Once they've clicked on the task, you'll see that they're going to be presented with something that's circled in red up here, and it's start mapping, and we want them to select ID editor from this little drop down. This is where the handoff begins. So this is why it's important to close all those other OpenStreetMap windows, because the tasking manager is going to open up a new ID editor for you. So you click on that, it opens up, it makes this little handoff, and then you're going to go into ID editor, you're going to map all the features. You see the lovely pink box up there, which you're already well acquainted with, and you know how to zoom into the area of interest and complete all of the tasks on there. Once you've completed all the tasks, we're handed over to here. This should look familiar to you now. You're going to add your change set comment in the top. You know, I added 10 buildings. I realigned the roads. You're going to add your school hashtag in there, and you're going to upload. I recommend that all of your students, there is a review request up here. I recommend that all newbies click this little box over here. That tells me, or somebody like me, that I'm a newbie, I've never done this before, I want somebody to tell me if I'm on the right track. And then you can get an email response or something like that that will let you know that, hey, good work, or yeah, you need to do this, or something like that. But you can get some feedback through this, and it's very useful for that. Finishing a task. Okay, so there are two ways to finish a task. You've either completely exhausted everything that can be digitized in the square, or you have not. If you have not, then it's just stop mapping. Stop mapping just releases the square so that somebody else can come along behind you and finish. Or if you want to come back behind yourself and finish later, you can do that. Only use complete mapping if you've exhausted all of the tasks within that square. So we begin with the tasking manager. We invoke the tasking manager. We select a square. We go to ID editor. We do all our digitizing. Close ID, we go back to the tasking manager and we say stop mapping, or we do something with that square. We release that square somehow, either through complete or stop. I don't think we need to dwell on this too much. I think we've all been through the ID editor. However, here's the thing, the important thing with the ID editor. I think as teachers, you all need to give your students time to play with this and to get familiar with both the OpenStreetMap interface, the plain old vanilla OpenStreetMap interface, and all the controls, but also give them time to complete the walkthrough and also play with all the controls on the ID editor. There's a lot of tools, tricks, bells, and whistles on those controls on there on the right-hand side of the screen. And I encourage you today to kind of like look through that right-hand, when you're in ID editor, look at all of the tools that are behind the panels in there, because there's a lot of powerful things that you can do with this ID editor in there. So please give your students time. I would devote a class period to this. So rather than launching into a Mapathon right away and trying to train and have a Mapathon all on the same day, I would encourage you to spend like a session with your students on the ID editor and the walkthrough and the interface only. Then come back and do your mapping on a separate occasion so that people get, repetitive and they get comfortable with the interface. A couple other useful features of the tasking manager. I've already talked about the user profile and contact information. A couple of my favorite things, I'm not going to read all of these, but are the bottom two features of here. You can control and restrict the permissions so that only your students can digitize on your projects that you make. So if you make a project and you just want your 2 o'clock class to digitize on that, work on that, and not let your 4 o'clock class do it, then you can restrict it to those people. Now you have to do a username by username. We don't have a way to kind of do 40 usernames at once, but you can kind of restrict the scope of who you want to work on this task. The second thing I really like is this project cloning. So suppose Mr. Sheets here creates a project that in Broward County, Florida, and someone else, one of other teachers, across the country says, hey, that's cool, I want to do that for my county. What you can do is you can clone Mr. Sheets' project and make it yours. And you can clone everything he did and then just import it into yours, change the area, and reproduce the whole thing. So we're starting to get in where we can reproduce lessons. So we're into that kind of where it's a little bit easier for us now to reproduce successful projects that other teachers have done. We can now do that with this project cloning thing. So it's a really useful feature I really like. I encourage you also to explore some of the tabs under the Tasking Manager. There's a lot of stuff up there. We recently upgraded from Tasking Manager 2 to Tasking Manager 3. And under there's some big improvements up under there. There are some how-to videos up under there. I think there's a Learn tab under on the Tasking Manager. Am I right? There's a Learn tab. So up under there, you'll find 3, 4, 5 of the most basic, useful how-to videos. They're all 2-minute videos. And I encourage you to explore those for yourself because also, as an aside, you should be comfortable mapping. If you're not comfortable mapping, your students are not going to, it's going to be hard for your students to map if you can't convey to them the importance of squaring your buildings and producing a good change set comment. So you need to be able to do that yourself. So that's kind of my aside here. One of the useful things about this Tasking Manager is if you want there are 2-minute video tutorials that you can click on here. So I'm after hours, maybe tonight or tomorrow or something like that, please take the time to review 1 or 2 of these videos. They're just the most rudimentary steps, how to digitize a building, how to sign up for an account, and some other things up under there. 5 of the most commonly used tasks up in there. So please take a look at this. I'm reproducing this because this is universal. This is universal to you as well. This comes from the OpenStreetMap wiki. There are some mapping tips, some best practices up and through here. I've circled the ones here that I think are most applicable to you and to your students here. A big one is using the name tag to describe what you're just doing. So, for example, it's common for newbies to digitize a house, and then they'll go to the name field and they'll type house. Well, the name of the building isn't house. You're describing a house, but the name of the building is, it may not have a name, right? So a big one is using the name tag as a descriptor. So there's a couple others here. Verifiability. Can you verify this on the ground? So if you can't, then it probably doesn't belong in OpenStreetMap. Good change set comments are part of it. We've already drilled that quite a bit. And don't use the name tag. Map what's on the ground. Don't use the name tag to describe things. Four big ones I think are good for newbies, so I'll put that out there for you. That's it. Any questions, please flag us down, and we'll pass this along. Thank you.
keep mapping. We're going to identify our next speakers and line them up on the stage just for a quick little overview, but just keep doing what you're doing and keep asking questions, okay?
Some of you have completed mapping projects before. Anne, I think I tapped you, and Derek Sheets. And who else has conducted a mapping project so far in their school? Raise your hand, please. No one? No one's conducted? Yeah, with OpenStreetMap, have you done? No? No one has done an OpenStreetMap project in their class yet? Okay. All right. Derek has, and what we want to do here is we want to take about 10 minutes and let some of the teachers who have conducted projects before share their experiences, what they did, and we just have 3 or 4 minutes each. It'd be very short. So yeah, here or there? Yep. Wherever you're comfortable. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Derek Sheets. I teach at Stranahan High School in Fort Lauderdale. And I've been using OpenStreetMap for about 2 years now. And with my students, we got 3 really distinct groups of kids. We have a medical magnet program at the school. We have an engineering magnet program at the school. And then we have our local kids, the kids that are zoned for my school. So the 3 different types of projects that we use for these kids. The first one is we have our incoming 9th graders. And they're not all upper level kids. It's varying levels. So with those kids, what they do is they map out the campus. And they map out features that we have, the buildings, some of the features that they would need to know once they start high school. So they use it as a good intro into what they're going to need to know. You know, they kind of use it as their orientation to the school. And we have them go through and do the walkthrough. They do some of the basic mapping, you know, and it's one of their summer programs. With the human geography kids, they also use the editor in OpenStreetMap. And with those 2 groups of kids, they each have their own thing that they focus on. Our engineering kids love the side of it. They have they take computer science classes, and they're interested in app development, so they're interested in that side of it. I have my medical kids that are interested in the humanitarian side of it, so they love the hot mapping. You know, they go through and they look at some of the different tasks that they have there, and each group kind of gravitates towards their own thing. So with human geography, one of the things that it talks about in, you know, like I believe Unit 1 is conducts, you know, field walks or conducts field research. So we use this. We actually have the kids go to the downtown area. They go through the neighborhood and they map out different features, how it's zoned. The neighborhood that my school's in has $1 million homes next to public housing. So it really is a good distinction for them. And my kids are from all over the county, so they get to see this area that our school's in. So it's one of those that we found a couple different uses for it. So they do that. They field papers was one of those things, so they're not actually bringing laptops out. They're writing the information down and bringing it in. So each group kind of has their own thing that they really like about it. Some of the, you know, the issues I've seen, I had one kid that really loved mapping swimming pools. He mapped every swimming pool in our neighborhood. Like Steven said, we had kids that named every house in the neighborhood house, even though, you know, that they didn't have a name. So there is ways to use it. One of the biggest things I know is time. What I usually have the kids do is a walkthrough. They do the walkthrough on their time. They register on their time. We spend one class kind of going through, and then we kind of manage the projects as the year goes on. All right, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ann Knipe, and I teach at Cosby High School in Chesterfield County, Virginia, which is about 20 minutes south of Richmond. Derek and I have a very similar situation, except I just grabbed 3 ideas from you for my classes. Our students who take geography are AP Human Geography students, and I'm lucky enough that this is my 3rd time to the AGS. I don't know how, why, but I'm very glad. And AP Human Geography has completely changed my life. I'm probably going to die in the classroom because I don't want to stop teaching as a result of teaching AP Human Geography. Our kids that take AP Human Geography are freshmen, and we're getting ready to start a new program. One of our teachers, the other AP Human teacher at our school is named Chris Tucker, and I have just sent our kids a picture, our AP classes, of what I call the real Chris Tucker, but they've already messaged me back saying we're with the real Chris Tucker. So we've got 2 Chris Tuckers. But OpenStreetMapping, I was actually introduced to OpenStreetMapping 3 years ago here at the first AGS. And last year we were able to, in my county, to actually take what Derek did, similar, and our kids played with it pretty much, not played, but they developed it all year long. And they created a welcome for the new AP kids coming in this year as kind of like an introduction to Cosby High School as a sense of place, where the kids actually did like a Pokemon, but it was a Go Titans. And it was going everywhere in the building because our kids come from, we're a magnet school for health science. And most of my students in my classroom are health science students. And they are what I call the 9th grade nerds. And our kids are globally aware. I have one class that has over 30 kids in it, and 19 of the 30 kids have at least 1 or 2 parents who were born in another country, and they're bilingual or they're trilingual, and they're very globally aware of what's going on. So OpenStreetMapping has just opened up their doors. And so I was so excited this year when Joanna contacted all of us about the mapping contest. And then suddenly, for some reason, my county decided they were going to firewall and block OpenStreetMapping. So don't ask me why. You don't want to get me on the political issue. I don't want to talk about that. So, you know, it's a very conservative community, but the kids were excited about it because I showed it to them. And then that night they got home and they were getting ready and they were being blocked with their school computers, with their Chromebooks. Don't get me started on that either. So they started playing around. They went to their parents, and their parents were like, okay, well, why don't you use our home computers? So the kids got savvy, and they started taking pictures with their phones, and they're bringing their phones to the classroom, and they're all excited. Look what we did on OpenStreetMapping. And I'm like, oh, okay, you get extra credit points for this. So they're AP kids. Sometimes they don't need extra credit points, but sometimes they do. So that's kind of a little thing you can play with them. But OpenStreetMapping has opened up just a whole new area for them in that they're looking at other avenues, not just through health science, but you know, I'm so excited to be able to get to meet other people and share things with you that I can take back into my classroom to help them love geography, and they do. They realize this is there. We can do this. We can add this to our knowledge, and we can improve the world, and we can become more globally aware. So OpenStreetMapping opened up our world, even though sometimes the conservative side closes our world. But now my AP students are in the process of creating a presentation before our school board that they're presenting after winter break, that they're going back and explaining to them why they should open up this firewall to create, you know, they also shut down our AP Human Geography teacher website that I can't link into immediately from my classroom, which I drive by the school board every day, you know, and once a week I'll stop by there and say, okay, you know, so eventually they're going to open it up for me. But, you know, OpenStreetMapping has opened our world because it is extremely empowering. So, you know, it's amazing. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Celia Crefter. I'm a first-year student here at Columbia University, and I am a former student of Celeste Reynolds, who has been here before. She's amazing, yes. Like many young college, high school, and even middle school students, I feel that it's easy to feel helpless and powerless in the face of endless information about our constantly changing and tumultuous world. And I found it to be especially true back home at my high school on Cape Cod, that so many of my peers wanted to do something to change the world and solve problems, but they didn't really know what influence they could have. They thought that they couldn't really do anything impactful. This was my main reason for deciding to organize the first ever Mashpee Humanitarian Mapathon, which it was great because I could put the power back into the hands of my peers to make real change. So, of course, this whole Mapathon planning and organization was inspired by Celeste. She's amazing. She mentored me through the whole process. I took her AP Human class my freshman year. It changed my life. It changed my outlook on the world. It was by far my favorite class that I took in high school. Nothing compared to it. And I loved it so much that I actually became the student mentor for the class my senior year, and helped her to teach the freshmen OSM and teach them about HOT and train them on the OSM program. So this was the springboard from which I launched the Mapathon project, was with these freshmen. So at the actual Mapathon, the project we mapped was HOT Project 4331, which focused on an area in the Bandarban district of Bangladesh, which is an at-risk area for natural disasters right near Cox's Bazar. So I think that it's extremely important for those of us who have privileges in this world to use our privilege to help solve problems in other parts of the world and do things to positively impact people that we've never met. I chose this because I knew that my peers and community members on Cape Cod would have no way to relate to the Rohingya refugees in Cox's Bazar. They would have no shared experiences. But I think that it's even more important for us as humans living as a part of this global community to feel compelled to help people that we can't relate to at all, who are completely different from us, even more than it is to help people who we feel likeness to. So the biggest challenge in organizing this Mapathon was getting a whole bunch of students and people in the community who had never heard of humanitarian mapping to come to the event and learn how to map and want to be there and be good enough at the program that they could participate sufficiently. So what I did was I went on an intense marketing campaign around the school and around town. I went to classrooms, I went to clubs, I went to community events. I sat down with people, I trained them on OSM, I explained to them how it worked, I told them about HOT. And it was really exciting because I could see everyone getting excited about it as soon as they realized that just using their computers and tapping away could make real impact in the world. And I think as a result of this, everyone who came, and it was people of all ages. Our youngest person at the Mapathon was in 5th grade, and it went all the way up, So it was so exciting. Everyone mapped responsibly, they mapped accurately, they took it really seriously, they really wanted to make a difference. And people who weren't able to bring laptops to the event, like some of the younger people there, were able to use the free MapSwipe app on their phones so they could still participate. MapSwipe is great. It's my favorite thing to do while I'm waiting for the subway. So the other thing I did to make sure that people were excited about coming to the event, because how do you get people who've never heard about mapping? I love geography. I'm a self-described GIS nerd, but not many people are. So what I did was I advertised the Mapathon as a party, and it was a party, I would say. We had live music performed by the band and chorus. I had a Spotify playlist of Bangladeshi music playing in the background during the downtime. I found sponsors in the community to donate food to the event. We had local media, the TV and newspaper there. And I organized a collaborative art project with some of my peers to highlight the 3 main messages of the event: humanitarianism, our connected world, and hope for the future. So all in all, in about 2 hours, I had 60 brand new beginner mappers there, and they made 1,192 edits to 4331, mapping 730 buildings and 62 kilometers of road. So I was so excited about this. People who were brand new and had just gotten started, that they mapped that amount. And I did have a leaderboard going to also inspire people to map faster. And the person at the top of our leaderboard mapped, I think, 100 buildings and 9 kilometers alone. So that was exciting. This project, for me, what I learned, it completely combined my 2 passions of art and activism, and completing the project actually inspired me to pursue a double major in theater and human rights here at Columbia. So I'm only a first year, but that's my plan. I learned so much about OSM and HOT and the power that one small community can have to change the world. And I would absolutely recommend, if you have an older student who loves mapping, who gets really involved in humanitarian mapping, I recommend that they organize a Mapathon and spread the joy to other students. Because when mapping goes from data entry to community bonding, an event with art and music and fun, that's when it becomes accessible to everyone, especially us young people, empowering us to change the world and inspiring us to become global citizens for life. Thank you. Questions? 4331. I believe it's all mapped now, but there's still some areas that need to be validated. Yes.
It's on the hot tasking manager, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, hot tasking manager, not the
Yeah.
TeachOSM tasking manager.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Any other questions? Thank you all so much.
Okay, we're rapidly running out of time, so I want to keep things moving. On your tables, there's a little pink slip of paper with a number on it. And memorize that number on your... These numbers correspond to the themes of the AP Human Geography curriculum. And your assignment is to return on Saturday morning loaded with ideas about how to implement a project, how to implement an open mapping project using whatever number that, I don't know if it's, if 7 matches up, I don't know what 5 matches up to. Joanna's we've got a printout where all those things, yeah, so we map the numbers to the we map the numbers to the, yeah. Oh, it's in your packets. In your packets is located a theme. Okay. Yes, so your number, find your theme on there, and your assignment is to come back Saturday morning fresh and rested with all sorts of ideas about how to apply open mapping to demography and population, or urban and, cities and urban form, or rural land uses and agriculture. So that will be our capstone project. On Saturday morning, what we're going to do is you're going to work in breakout groups together in order to come up with a project, and we'll give you project manager privileges on the TeachOSM tasking manager so that you will be able to begin creating your own projects, and we'll walk you through that process on Saturday morning. So, yes, and so let's see, George, we could set up a Google form. No, let's just, the easiest thing to do is email Richard Hinton with your OSM username. rhinton, R-H-I-N-T-O-N, R-H-I-N-T-O-N.
Yeah.
Richard Hinton, rhinton.
GWU.
At GWU. GWU.edu, yes.
So rhinton at GWU.edu.
T-O-N.
Your OSM username.
H-I-N-T-O-N at GWU.edu. Need it again? Has everybody got it? Just email your OSM username to Richard Hinton. Just your OSM username. Mail your OSM username to Richard Hinton.
Remember, your OSM usernames are case sensitive, so if you have mixed case, like mine is mix of capitals and lowercase, please include those exactly as they appear in the upper right-hand corner of OSM. Or if there are spaces. Yeah, make sure you do that. Thank you.
We are right at 12 o'clock, so I want to keep moving. Many of you are aware that we have had with TeachOSM, along with American Geographical Society, has recently conducted a contest, the Great County Mapping Contest. The challenge was to map all of the public buildings in your county. Public libraries, public schools, all of the public government buildings, anything that's publicly owned. The task was to create a complete map of all the public buildings in your county. And I'm pleased to announce that we had 296 students participating on, I think we had 60 teams between all of the schools that participated. We had over 1,800, almost 1,900 change sets made. We digitized 932 buildings, and we edited, this is astonishing to me, another 1,000 buildings on top of that, which means that buildings that were already on OpenStreetMap, your students went in and added more information to that. And that's very useful information downstream. So we have some winners that we'd like to announce, and so let's get on with that. For the most features and edits, this is for the greatest number of good edits, and the winner is?
Yeah, so these are, we think, are significant prizes, $750 for each of the 3 winners. And we want to talk more about how can we make that pool of prizes bigger and more extensive as we go forward, because this is really, those of you who participated, we appreciate that you were essentially guinea pigs in a pilot. We want to get the whole contest thing going to be not just 600 students, but 60,000 students, 600,000 students, because it's a party and it's fun, as we heard. So those features and edits, the winner is Troy Athens, led by Susan Syme, class of 17, 230 points, 79.9% quality edits. And the $750 check will be in the mail. Number 2, you want to describe the category, Steve?
Yes.
Highest quality.
Yes, the highest quality overall contributions. This award goes to the team with the greatest number of high quality edits and the fewest number of mistakes. And the winner?
The winner is AAST Myrtle Beach, led by Evan Sellers, class of 2018. 145 points and 88% quality edits.
Take a bow, please.
Yeah.
Lastly, we had a lot of participants with big schools, small schools, big teams, large teams. This last award goes to Great Things from Small Teams. And the award is?
The award goes to the Cinco Ranch, led by Betsy Smalley, class of 17, 76 points, 87.4% quality edits. And they also came in second place for the overall quality contributions. So small schools can do great things.
Yep.
I want to also mention that we're looking for more input from you on how we could make this whole competition idea bigger, better. We think it's a great way to get attention for AGS. It's a great way to get students involved in something fun. We need to make it so it's manageable, and you've done a great job at doing that. But here we had first world edits that came up with quite a bit just to say, where are the buildings, public buildings in my counties? Imagine what we could do with all kinds of other themes, and Stephen has a lot of other themes that could be a third world issue, a catastrophe issue that we could really ramp up. So I think we'd really like to, and Marie, stop me if I'm getting too far, but figure out the next kind of competition, literally in the next, in the spring, that could be bigger, better, more money, and also more people involved, because we think it's a good way to ramp up the whole visibility for AGS and for open source mapping and for all the great things that you all do. So thank you very much for participating, for everybody.
Congratulations to the winners.
Pictures and then. So I'm just kind of sliding in here, and hopefully I don't screw up John Konarski's agenda. I wanted to point out, since you all have laptops, on the AmericanGeo.org website at the top, there's a thing called I Am Geo. And it's a campaign that started, well, we kind of geared it up over the last year. We had a lot of requests from the teachers on our Saturday session last year saying, it's hard for us to communicate to our students the kinds of job opportunities and careers and everything that are available to someone who loves geography. And we had kind of been thinking about this, so we started a campaign called I Am Geography, hashtag I Am Geo out on Twitter, and we try to put them out as frequently as we can get them, because we're asking our members and people in the profession to write up their kind of first-person profile and to get us 4 high-resolution pictures. I say that for 2 reasons. Three reasons. One is there are a number of people who are going to be here. It's a good networking opportunity if you just leaf through those in your spare time. There's a couple pages of them. Many of those people in the room, so you can walk up to them and say, I read your profile, and I'd love to talk to you more about your career. So it's kind of a networking opportunity. The other thing is, you can use it with your students. We kind of built it for, that's one of the reasons we built it. And we have just some fascinating people that are part of the life of the society doing fascinating careers, all based on geography. And the third reason I wanted to bring it up is I would personally really appreciate it if you took the time to write up your own profiles. So we have, I think, 3 of our AGS teacher fellows have profiles, I think 3. And I would love that to be all of 50 of you and the previous 100 from the previous 2 years. And I understand you're very busy. Some of you are shy and don't want to write about yourself. That's okay too. But you'll kind of get a gist when you read them. It's a short kind of personal statement about your passion for geography, where it's taken you in life, what you hope to do with it to make the world a better place, or whatever. Talk about your cats. I don't really care. It's your personal statement. You get to do whatever you like with it. And then it's 4 high-resolution pictures, and you have to understand we're putting it on the website and we're tweeting it out. Anyways, we'd love to have you be a part of that campaign because you are Geo too. That's it. So John, pass it over to John, and he'll close this out.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Okay, I guess we're out of time. This was a great morning. When we get together on Saturday, our TeachOSM team will be back so we can review the morning and make some plans for the next few months. So now we're going to break for a quick lunch, which is going to be served in the rear of the auditorium. It's a box lunch, and you get to keep the little bags that they're in. But before that, of course, I need to thank Nuala, Richard, Stephen, David, and Brian, as well as everybody from Boundless and MapBox for supporting us and for their continued assistance as we move forward. Thank you very much.